The Grand Hall of Concordia Prime glittered with the artificial light of 1,000 suspended orbs, each programmed to mimic the natural illumination of a different member world of the Galactic Commonwealth. Captain Anya Sharma, representing humanity as a technical advisor to the Kthar Energy Initiative, stood out in her crisp Earth Defense Force uniform, a stark contrast to the flowing robes of the more established species. She tapped her datapad impatiently, mentally rehearsing her presentation one last time. "The Kthar delegation approaches," whispered her Commonwealth liaison, a nervous Flexian with translucent skin that currently displayed a pattern of anxious purple swirls. Anya nodded, straightening her posture as the reptilian Kthar representatives entered the chamber. Their scales gleamed with precious metals and rare minerals, a typical Kthar display of superiority. Leading them was High Engineer Sevranik, his neck frill extended slightly in what Anya had learned was a sign of anticipation. "Captain Sharma," he hissed, inclining his head barely enough to be considered polite. "I trust you have reviewed our final specifications for the Joint Energy Matrix?" "I have," Anya replied, keeping her voice level despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. "And I've identified a critical security vulnerability in the containment protocols." She tapped her datapad, projecting a holographic schematic between them. "The current configuration leaves the power regulation subroutines exposed to potential cascade failures. One targeted surge, and the entire station could lose power, or worse." Sevranik's frill flattened against his neck, a sign of displeasure. "These designs were created by our finest engineers, drawing on millennia of expertise. Perhaps Earth's limited experience with advanced energy systems has led you to misinterpret our safeguards." Anya bit back, a sharp retort. This was exactly the kind of dismissive attitude that humans had faced since joining the Commonwealth. "With respect, High Engineer, I've worked on containment systems across 17 planetary environments. This vulnerability exists regardless of who designed it." The Kthar engineer's eyes narrowed to slits. "Your concerns are noted, Captain. We will proceed as scheduled." "But the demonstration begins in 1 hour," he interrupted, turning away in dismissal. "The Archons themselves will be in attendance. I suggest you focus on your assigned role and leave the complex engineering to those better suited to understand it." Anya watched him go, frustration burning in her chest. She documented the vulnerability thoroughly and submitted her findings through all the proper channels. But the Kthar consistently ignored human input. Their garden world evolution had produced a species with an unshakable superiority complex, convinced that creatures from death worlds like Earth couldn't possibly match their intellectual refinement. 3 hours later, Anya stood rigid before the Commonwealth Security Council, her hands cuffed in ceremonial restraints that glowed with a soft blue light. The grand reception had descended into chaos when, exactly as she predicted, the energy matrix experienced a surge that shut down power to the East Quadrant, right in the middle of the Kthar ambassador's welcoming speech. Captain Anya Sharma intoned the Flexian adjudicator, their skin now a formal pattern of stern blue and white. "You stand accused of deliberate sabotage of the Kthar energy demonstration, an act that endangered diplomatic relations and security protocols of Concordia Prime." "This is absurd," Anya protested. "I warned them about this exact vulnerability. I have the documentation." "Silence," roared the Kthar representative, Sevranik himself. "We have evidence that the human accessed the control systems shortly before the failure. She clearly created the very vulnerability she warned about, then triggered it to embarrass our delegation." The adjudicator's luminescent appendages rippled. "Is this true, Captain? I accessed the system to run diagnostics, try to implement emergency safeguards since no one would listen." Anya fought to keep her voice steady. "Check the logs. You'll see I was attempting to patch the vulnerability, not exploit it." But Anya could already see the judgment in their eyes. The Kthar were founding members of the Commonwealth. Humans were barely tolerated newcomers. Her word against theirs was no contest at all. After a deliberation that seemed more performative than genuine, the adjudicator spoke again. "To preserve interspecies harmony and to serve as a lesson in humility, This council sentences Captain Anya Sharma to 6 standard months of rehabilitative exile on Xylos, classified as Deathworld Gamma. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Xylos was notorious. A hostile jungle world with toxic precipitation and predatory flora and fauna. Not the most lethal environment in the galaxy, but certainly enough to break the spirit of a pampered Commonwealth citizen. The sentence will commence immediately, the adjudicator continued. The accused will be provided with standard survival equipment as mandated by Commonwealth exile protocols. Severanik's frill expanded in satisfaction, his scales shimmering with vindication. As the guards moved to escort her away, Anya locked eyes with the Cathar engineer. Instead of fear or defeat, she offered him a small, defiant smile. "Exiled to a death world?" she said, just loud enough for him to hear. "Sounds like a Tuesday for a human." The Commonwealth transport ship broke through Xylos's cloud cover, descending toward a clearing in the dense jungle canopy. Through the view screen, Anya could see an endless expanse of vegetation in unsettling shades of purple and blue-green. Occasional flashes of movement suggested the presence of wildlife, none of which would be welcoming to an alien visitor. The Flexian officer handed her a small survival pack. "Standard exile provisions," he explained, not unkindly. His skin displayed what Anya recognized as a sympathetic pattern. "I included a combat knife. It's not regulation, but Xylos is—" "Thanks," Anya said, genuinely appreciating the gesture. She opened the pack to inventory its meager contents: a multi-tool knife, a half-functioning water filter, a tarp, and a few packages of emergency nutrition. 6 months with this, huh? The Commonwealth really knows how to show hospitality. "The shuttle will return in exactly 6 standard months," the officer said, ignoring her sarcasm. "If you survive, you'll be retrieved and your sentence considered fulfilled." "When I survive," Anya corrected, slinging the pack over her shoulder as the ship touched down. "See you in 6 months." The hatch opened with a mechanical hiss, releasing a wave of hot, humid air laden with alien scents, some sweet, some putrid, all unfamiliar. Anya stepped out onto the alien soil, her EDF training kicking in immediately as she scanned her surroundings for immediate threats. The transport wasted no time, rising back into the atmosphere almost as soon as her boots hit the ground. Anya watched it disappear, then took a deep breath of Xylos's strangely metallic-tasting air. First things first, she muttered to herself. Water, shelter, food. In that order. The relentless downpour caught Anya by surprise 3 hours into her trek. What started as light precipitation quickly transformed into sheets of water that stung her exposed skin. "Acid rain," she hissed, ducking under a large frond-like plant for minimal protection while she pulled out her tarp. The water filter from her pack might remove particulates, but wouldn't neutralize acid. She needed to find proper shelter, and fast. Following a slight downward slope in the terrain, Anya made her way through the increasingly dense undergrowth. Twice she had to use her knife to fend off vine-like growths that seemed to reach for her, razor vine creepers, according to the limited briefing she'd received. Their edges were literally sharp enough to slice through flesh, and they reacted to motion and body heat. The sound of rushing water eventually led her to a cascade tumbling from a rocky outcropping. Behind the waterfall, as she'd hoped, was a shallow cave. Anya approached cautiously, aware that such an ideal shelter would likely have attracted other inhabitants. Using a long branch, she probed the darkness, then tossed a small glowing fungus she'd collected into the depths. Nothing lunged at the light or the movement. After a careful inspection, she deemed the cave temporarily safe and set about making it habitable. The acid rain continued for hours, giving Anya time to assess her situation. The cave was deeper than it first appeared, extending back about 15 meters. Some previous geological activity had created natural shelves and niches in the rock walls, useful for storing whatever supplies she might gather. Her most pressing concern was the water. Testing confirmed her suspicion. The rainfall was mildly acidic, as was the waterfall. She couldn't drink either without treatment. The half-functional filter would help, but it wasn't a long-term solution. By nightfall, a rapid transition on Xylos, she discovered Anya had erected a collection system using her tarp, funneling rainwater through a bed of crushed mineral deposits she'd found in the cave. The minerals had an alkaline reaction with the water, partially neutralizing the acid. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep her alive. Day 1, she said to herself, leaning against the cave wall and chewing one of her emergency ration bars. Not dead yet. That's got to disappoint Severanik. The thought made her smile despite the dire circumstances. She'd known what the Cthar didn't, that humans came for what the Commonwealth classified as a Class Alpha Deathworld. Earth's gravity, weather extremes, diverse biomes, and evolutionary history of predators and disasters had forged humanity into perhaps the most adaptable species in the galaxy. The Cthar, from their stable, temperate garden world, could never understand what that meant. 6 months, Anya whispered as the alien night filled with unsettling sounds. Let's show them what a human can do in 6 months. Days melded into weeks as Anya established her survival routine. The cave became a functional base camp, with improvements added regularly as she explored the surrounding area and discovered usable materials. Her water purification system evolved into a more elaborate filtration setup using layers of charcoal, from burned vegetation, crushed minerals, and a species of moss that naturally absorbed acidic compounds. She discovered this property after noticing the moss growing at the edges of acidic pools, but not in them, suggesting it created a microenvironment of neutralized water around itself. Food had been a greater challenge. Her emergency rations lasted only 2 weeks, even with careful rationing. After that, it was a process of careful testing of local flora and fauna. Anya developed a systematic approach. Touch to skin, wait for reaction. Touch to lips, wait. Taste a minuscule amount, wait longer. Many specimens failed these tests, causing rashes, numbness, or nausea that convinced her to avoid ingestion. Eventually, she identified several edible options. A root vegetable similar to a tuber that required thorough cooking to break down its toxic compounds. A beetle-like insect with surprisingly nutritious flesh when roasted. And small, red berries that grew on thorny bushes near water sources. The berries were mildly hallucinogenic if eaten raw, but lost this property when dried. A discovery Anya made the hard way, resulting in a 12-hour period of seeing colors that didn't exist. Hunting proved both necessary and dangerous. The larger creatures of Xylos were formidable opponents, with evolutionary adaptations that made Earth's predators seem almost quaint by comparison. Particularly troublesome were the Gloomfang stalkers, 6-limbed predators capable of optical camouflage, so effective they were nearly invisible until they moved. Anya learned to spot the subtle distortion in the air that betrayed their presence, and to listen for their distinctive breathing. She crafted primitive but effective traps from razor vine creepers, carefully harvested using her multi-tool, and flexible saplings, catching smaller prey that supplemented her diet. Each successful adaptation to Xylos' challenges felt like a personal victory against the Commonwealth that had abandoned her here. On her 32nd day on Xylos, Anya's life changed again. She was tracking what appeared to be a new food source, a small burrowing creature that left distinctive digging patterns, when she heard a high-pitched squeal of distress. Following the sound, she came upon a clearing where a Gloomfang stalker had cornered a small creature against a rocky outcropping. The trapped animal resembled nothing so much as a feathered rodent, with intelligent eyes and tiny, dexterous forepaws. It was trying to climb the rocks to escape, but kept sliding down. Without conscious thought, Anya found herself acting. She grabbed a heavy branch and charged into the clearing, shouting to draw the predator's attention. The Gloomfang world, its camouflage dropping to reveal iridescent scales and rows of needle-like teeth. It hissed, clearly annoyed at the interruption of its hunt. "Come on, you oversized chameleon," Anya taunted, swinging her makeshift weapon. "Let's see if you like picking on something your own size." The battle was brief but intense. The Gloomfang was faster than Anya, but she had fought in Earth's gravity and found Xylos's slightly lower pull gave her an advantage in jumping and dodging. When the creature lunged, she sidestepped and brought her branch down hard on its skull, stunning it long enough to drive her knife into what she hoped was a vulnerable spot at the base of its neck. The predator convulsed, then collapsed. Anya remained tense, ready for it to rise again, but the creature was dead. Breathing heavily, she turned toward the rocky outcropping. The small feathered creature was still there, watching her with what seemed like curiosity rather than fear. As their eyes met, Anya had the distinct impression she was being evaluated. "You're welcome," she said, not expecting the creature to understand. To her astonishment, it made a series of chirping sounds and then, using its dexterous little paws, gestured in what was unmistakably a mimicry of her fighting stance. "Well," Anya said, a smile spreading across her face, "aren't you full of surprises?" The creature, which Anya mentally dubbed a squill based on its squirrel-like appearance and the trilling sounds it made, did not immediately flee. Instead, it approached cautiously, making more of those musical chirping noises. "I don't speak squill, I'm afraid," Anya said, crouching to appear less threatening. She pointed to herself. "Anya." The creature tilted its head, then pointed a tiny paw at itself, and made a sound that resembled Pip. "Pip, is it your name?" Anya smiled. "Nice to meet you, Pip." What followed was the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Pip stayed close to Anya as she harvested usable parts from the Gloomfawn carcass. The tough hide would make good weatherproof coverings, and the teeth could be fashioned into tools or weapons. Occasionally, Pip would chirp and point at certain parts, which Anya took as suggestions about what was valuable. When she prepared to head back to her cave, Pip followed. Initially, Anya assumed the creature was simply curious or perhaps hoping for food. But as days passed, it became clear there was more to their connection. Pip was intelligent, far more so than any earth animal Anya had encountered. The squill could learn simple words and appeared to understand basic concepts when Anya explained them. More impressively, Pip began teaching Anya about Xylos. Through a combination of gestures, sounds, and demonstration, the squill showed her which plants were safe to eat, confirming some of her discoveries and correcting others, where to find the purest water sources, and how to recognize signs of predators. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Pip led Anya deeper into the forest than she had ventured before. After several hours of travel, they arrived at what could only be described as a village. Dozens of structures woven from flexible vines and built into the trees, connected by an elaborate network of bridges and platforms. And everywhere squills, hundreds of them, in various sizes and with subtle differences in their feather patterns and colors. They froze at the sight of Anya, their collective chirping rising to an alarmed crescendo. Pip stepped forward, making a series of complex sounds and gestures. The other squills hesitated, then a larger one with silver-streaked fur approached. This elder squill circled Anya carefully, chittering to Pip, who responded with what sounded like excited explanations. Finally, the elder made a gesture that caused the other squills to relax. It then pointed at Anya, then at the village, and finally made a sweeping motion with its paw. "I think I'm being welcomed," Anya said to Pip, who bobbed enthusiastically. The squill village opened up new possibilities for Anya's survival. The creatures had developed surprisingly sophisticated techniques for living in harmony with Xylos's harsh environment. Their woven dwellings repelled the acidic rain, and they cultivated certain plants that attracted desirable prey while deterring dangerous predators. Communication remained challenging, but improved daily. Pip proved to be an eager translator, helping Anya learn key squill gestures and sound while absorbing her spoken words at an impressive rate. Within a month, they had developed a functional, if limited, shared language. It was during one of these language sessions that Anya first heard about the blight. Pip had been teaching her the squill words for various environmental features when the little creature's demeanor suddenly changed. Pointing to a distant part of the forest where the vegetation seemed discolored, Pip made a series of harsh, distressed sounds, followed by a gesture Anya had come to recognize as their sign for danger or evil. "What's over there, Pip?" Something dangerous? Pip nodded vigorously, then mimicked a plant growing, then withering and dying. Next came an imitation of a squirrel drinking water and becoming sick. Something is poisoning the plants and water? Anya guessed. Another emphatic nod, followed by the danger sign, and a sweeping motion indicating expansion or growth. And it's spreading, Pip confirmed, adding a timeline gesture that suggested the problem had been developing for many cycles of Xylos's 3 moons, perhaps years. Anya's curiosity was piqued. Can you show me? From a safe distance, she added, seeing Pip's alarm. The next day, they set out with 2 other brave squills who had volunteered to guide them. As they approached the affected area, the changes in the environment became unmistakable. The vibrant purples and blues of healthy Xylos vegetation faded to sickly grays and browns. The air carried an acrid scent that made Anya's eyes water. "Wait here," she told her companions, pulling a makeshift mask over her face. "I'm going to take a closer look." Despite their protests, Anya ventured closer to the heart of the disturbance. The degradation worsened with each step. Plants twisted into unnatural shapes, small pools of water gleamed with an oily, metallic sheen, and the ground itself seemed to have changed consistency, becoming powdery in some places and unnaturally hard in others. Then she saw it, a faint glint of metal through the diseased vegetation. Pushing aside the brittle plants, Anya uncovered a section of what appeared to be a manufactured structure, partially buried and overgrown, but unmistakably artificial. "This isn't natural," she muttered, carefully examining the exposed section. The material was unlike any she'd seen in Commonwealth technology, older perhaps, but built to last. Embedded in the visible panel were symbols in a writing system she didn't recognize. Pulling out her multi-tool, Anya scraped a small sample from both the structure and the surrounding soil, storing them in separate containers fashioned from hollowed seed pods. She'd need to analyze them back at her cave, using the rudimentary chemical testing methods she'd developed. As she worked, a low growl emanated from the underbrush nearby. Anya froze, then slowly turned to face the source of the sound. What emerged was a creature she recognized as a smaller cousin of the Gloomfang stalker, except this one was grotesquely altered. Its scales were patchy and discolored, one limb significantly larger than its counterpart, and its eyes clouded with a milky film that suggested partial blindness. Despite these deformities, it moved with predatory purpose, focusing on Anya with unnerving intensity. She backed away slowly, reaching for a knife. The creature lunged suddenly, its movements jerky but surprisingly fast. Anya dodged, but not quickly enough to avoid a slash from its claws that tore through her sleeve and left shallow cuts on her arm. She retaliated with a strike from her knife, aiming for the same vulnerable spot she'd found on the Gloomfang. This time, however, the blade met unexpected resistance. The mutated creature's hide was tougher, almost metallically hardened in places. It screeched in pain, but didn't fall. "Anya!" Pip's voice came from behind her, using one of the few human words the squill had mastered. The little creature and its companions had followed despite her instructions to stay back. "Get back!" she shouted, circling warily as the predator prepared for another attack. Instead of retreating, Pip made a sharp whistling sound. Immediately, all 3 squills began pelting the creature with small, hard seeds from pouches they carried. The seeds exploded on impact, releasing a sticky substance that seemed to cause the predator intense discomfort. It thrashed wildly, trying to remove the adhesive material from its eyes and sensory organs. While it was distracted, Anya struck again, this time finding a gap in the hardened hide near its throat. The creature collapsed, twitching violently before going still. "Thanks for the save," Anya said, breathing heavily. Pip approached the dead creature cautiously, then made a series of gestures indicating it was unlike others of its kind. Changed, wrong. "Yeah, I noticed," Anya agreed, looking back at the partially exposed structure. "And I think I know why." Her analysis back at the cave confirmed her suspicions. The samples contained trace elements not naturally occurring on Xylos, at least not in the concentration she'd found. Most concerning were indications of radioactive materials and synthetic compounds that reminded her of industrial waste. "It's not natural at all," she explained to Pip and the elder squill, who had come to hear her findings. "It's pollution, contamination from some kind of technology. This blight is spreading from that structure we found." Using drawings and gestures, she conveyed her theory. The structure was part of an abandoned mining facility, likely left behind by a spacefaring race that had exploited Xylos and departed, unconcerned with the environmental impact of their operations. A containment system had finally degraded enough to allow toxic materials to leach into the surrounding environment, causing mutations in the local flora and fauna. The elder squill seemed to grasp the concept, responding with a series of sorrowful chirps and a gesture Anya had learned indicated ancestral memory or history. Pip translated as best it could. Long ago, Anya interpreted, tall beings from the sky came with great machines. They dug deep and took shiny stones. Then they left when the stones became few. The elders remember. The elder nodded, then made urgent gestures toward the discolored section of forest, followed by a drinking motion and a sign of sickness. "The blight is reaching your main water source," Anya translated, alarm growing. "How soon?" The answer, conveyed through moon cycle gestures, was disturbing. Within the equivalent of 2 Earth months, the contamination would reach the river that provided water for the entire squill community. "We need to stop it," Anya said resolutely. "And to do that, we need to find a way inside that facility." Over the following weeks, scouting parties of squills and Anya mapped the extent of the blight and located several more exposed sections of the abandoned facility. It became clear they were dealing with an extensive complex, mostly underground, with multiple access points, all of which appeared sealed or blocked by debris. Meanwhile, the contamination continued to spread. More mutated creatures emerged from the affected areas, increasingly aggressive and difficult to fend off. Several squills were injured in attacks, and one scout never returned from a mapping expedition. The situation grew more desperate when a particularly heavy acid rain caused a landslide that exposed more of the facility and accelerated the leakage of toxic materials. The timeline for contamination of the main water source shifted from months to weeks. Anya worked feverishly to prepare for what she knew would be a dangerous expedition into the heart of the facility. From scavenged materials and parts cannibalized from her few remaining Earth items, she fashioned crude but functional equipment, battery-powered lights harvested from her water filter's indicator system, protective masks made from specially treated plant fibers, and rudimentary tools for bypassing whatever security systems might remain active. "We need a team," she explained to Pip and the elder, "small enough to move quickly, but with different skills." Through careful selection, they assembled their exploration party, Anya as the leader and technical expert, Pip as the translator and with unusually keen senses, Twix, a larger male squill renowned for his strength and bravery, Safa, a female with exceptional climbing abilities, and an older squill known for his knowledge of plants and natural compounds. On the morning of their expedition, the entire squill village gathered to see them off. The elder performed a brief ceremony, touching each team member on the forehead with a small object that resembled a crystal but was actually a hardened resin produced by a native insect. It was their highest blessing for protection. "We'll stop the blight," Anya promised, feeling the weight of responsibility for these creatures who had become her community. "Or die trying." Pip chittered something that made the other squills bob in agreement. "What did you say?" Anya asked. The little creature looked up at her with bright eyes and managed to form the human words carefully. "Tuesday for human." Despite the gravity of their situation, Anya laughed. "That's right, Pip. Just another Tuesday for a human." The facility's main entrance, when they finally located it beneath a tangle of mutated vines, was a massive door designed for beings considerably larger than either humans or squills. Centuries of exposure had fused its mechanism, but a smaller maintenance access panel to one side proved more vulnerable to Anya's improvised tools. "Stay close," she instructed her companions as they squeezed through the opening. Touch nothing unless I say it's safe. The interior of the facility was a maze of corroded metal corridors, partially collapsed chambers, and machinery whose purpose Anya could only guess at. Emergency lighting systems, powered by what must have been incredibly durable energy cells, still functioned in some sections, casting an eerie blue glow over their path. Evidence of the hasty evacuation was everywhere. Abandoned tools, discarded personal items, and in one chamber, what appeared to be recreational facilities left mid-use. Whatever had caused the original occupants to leave, they had done so quickly. As they ventured deeper, the facility's air grew more acrid. Anya checked her makeshift atmospheric sensor, a color-changing moss attached to a portable frame, and noted with concern that toxicity levels were rising. "Masks on," she ordered, demonstrating for the squills. Their coverings were designed to filter particulates and absorb some gaseous contaminants, but they wouldn't provide protection indefinitely. Guided by the increasing levels of contamination, they made their way toward what Anya believed was the heart of the problem. Several times, they had to backtrack around collapsed sections or areas where the toxicity exceeded even their mask's capabilities. They encountered automated systems that still functioned, mostly maintenance drones that ignored them or security scanners that flashed warnings in an incomprehensible alien language before falling silent. The facility had been designed to go dormant rather than aggressively defend itself when abandoned. Their progress was halted temporarily when they reached a sealed inner door that resisted Anya's bypass attempts. It was Safa who found the solution, discovering a ventilation duct large enough for the squills to navigate. The nimble creatures made their way through the system and managed to trigger the emergency release from the other side. Beyond the door lay a vast chamber dominated by what could only be the facility's power core, a towering cylindrical structure surrounded by control consoles and feed lines that extended throughout the complex. The technology was unfamiliar, but the principles seemed universal. It was a massive energy generation system, likely powered by fission or some similar process, judging by the radiation warnings Anya recognized on several panels. But the system was failing. Containment fields flickered erratically, and several of the feed lines had ruptured, leaking coolant or other substances. At the base of the core, a pool of viscous, glowing liquid was slowly expanding. "This is it," Anya said, approaching the nearest intact console. "This is the source of the blight." Her examination of the system confirmed her worst fears. The power core was in the late stages of a meltdown. Containment was failing, and when it did, the resulting release of radiation and toxic materials would contaminate not just the Squill village's water supply, but potentially the entire region. "We need to shut it down," she explained to her companions. "There must be an emergency shutdown procedure." The challenge was deciphering the alien controls. While some symbols were intuitive, warning indicators, power levels, temperature gauges, the command structures were completely foreign. Anya had to test cautiously, observing the system's responses to minor inputs before attempting anything significant. Time was not on their side. Twice during their work, automated alerts sounded as containment fields experienced momentary failures. Each time, they had to seek shelter until the system temporarily restabilized. After hours of careful analysis, Anya believed she had identified the shutdown sequence. The problem was that the system required simultaneous activation of two widely separated control stations, a safety feature to prevent accidental or unauthorized deactivation. "Pip, you and Twix will need to operate that console," she said, pointing to a station on the opposite side of the chamber. "When I give the signal, press this sequence of buttons, exactly as I show you." She demonstrated the pattern several times until the squills could replicate it perfectly. Then she positioned herself at the main console, ready to initiate the synchronized shutdown. "On my mark," she called across the chamber. 3, 2, 1 now." Both stations came alive as they entered the commands. For a moment, it seemed to be working. Indicators shifted from red to yellow, and the ominous hum of the core began to diminish. Then everything went wrong. Instead of shutting down cleanly, the power core initiated what appeared to be an emergency purge cycle. Warning lights flashed, and automated announcements blared in the alien language. A massive surge of energy coursed through the system, blowing out several control panels in cascades of sparks. "It's overloading," Anya shouted. "Everyone, take cover." The squills scrambled for shelter behind equipment housings. Anya dived behind a console just as a section of ceiling collapsed, crushing the station where she'd been standing moments before. Through the chaos, she analyzed what had happened. The shutdown sequence had been correct, but the system was too degraded to execute it properly. Now, instead of shutting down, it was accelerating toward catastrophic failure. There was only one option left. "We need to manually sever the feed lines," she called to her companions. "If we can disconnect the core from the distribution system, we might contain the meltdown to this chamber alone." It was a desperate plan. The feed lines were massive conduits, heavily shielded and designed to resist tampering. But they were also centuries old and corroded in places. Anya directed her team to the 6 primary conduits that connected the core to the rest of the facility. Using tools scavenged from the facility itself and the explosive seeds the squills carried, they began to attack the weakest junction points. Progress was agonizingly slow, and the core's instability increased with each passing minute. 2 lines were successfully severed when disaster struck again. A particularly violent energy surge triggered a security response, and several dormant defense drones activated, interpreting their activities as sabotage. "Incoming," Twix chittered, pointing at the approaching machines. La and Sci-Fi used their explosive seeds to disable 2 of the drones, while Anya managed to short-circuit a third with a damaged power cable. But there were too many, and the team was forced to split up, taking cover wherever they could. Pip remained with Anya, helping her continue work on the 3rd feed line, while the others drew the drones away. They had nearly severed the connection when Anya noticed the core's containment field was failing completely. In minutes, perhaps seconds, it would collapse, releasing a deadly wave of radiation and superheated plasma. "We're out of time," she told Pip. "Go, get the others and run." The little squill refused to move, tugging at her arm and chittering urgently. When Anya resisted, Pip pointed to a previously unnoticed maintenance panel near the base of the core. Through gesture and their shared language, the squill conveyed a desperate idea. The panel might access the core's manual ejection system, designed to jettison the power source in case of critical failure. It was a long shot, but their only remaining option. Together, they sprinted across the chamber, dodging falling debris and arcs of energy as the facility literally tore itself apart around them. Reaching the panel, Anya wrenched it open to reveal a complex array of mechanisms, both mechanical and electronic. "This has to be it," she muttered, quickly identifying what appeared to be an ejection sequence trigger. But it was damaged, the connection severed by centuries of corrosion. "We need to bridge the circuit," she told Pip, looking around frantically for conductive material. Finding nothing suitable, she reached for her multi-tool knife, her most treasured possession and final link to Earth. Without hesitation, she jammed it into the gap, creating a makeshift conductor. Electricity surged through the tool and into Anya's hand, sending her flying backward. Pip rushed to her side as she struggled to rise, the burns on her hand excruciating. But it had worked. With a thunderous rumble, the ejection system activated. The floor beneath the power core split open, and massive pistons pushed the failing reactor into a hardened containment shaft designed to direct the blast upward, away from the facility's main structure. "Run!" Anya gasped, pulling herself to her feet with Pip's help. They staggered toward the exit, collecting the other squills along the way. Behind them, the chamber was collapsing as the ejection system reconfigured the facility's architecture to channel the impending explosion. They just reached the outer corridor when the core breached. The explosion sent a shockwave through the entire complex, flinging them forward. Anya instinctively curled around Pip, protecting the small creature as they tumbled down the corridor amid a cascade of debris. Then everything went black. Anya awoke to the sensation of something cool and damp being pressed against her forehead. Opening her eyes, She found herself back in the Squill village, surrounded by concerned faces. Pip sat beside her, applying a poultice of medicinal plants to her numerous cuts and burns. "Did we do it?" she asked hoarsely. "Did we stop it?" Pip nodded vigorously, then pointed toward the forest. Through gesture and their shared language, the little creature explained. The core had indeed been ejected, and while its detonation had created a new crater in the forest, the specialized containment shaft had directed most of the blast upward into the atmosphere. The underground facility had partially collapsed, effectively sealing the remaining contamination sources. Most importantly, the spread of the blight had stopped. It would take time for the ecosystem to recover fully, but the immediate threat to the Squill's water supply was neutralized. "How long was I unconscious?" Anya asked. Pip indicated 3 cycles of Xylos's primary sun, 3 days. She had suffered concussion, burns, and several broken ribs, but the Squill's surprisingly advanced herbal medicine had stabilized her condition. The entire village had declared a celebration to honor their saviors. Despite her injuries, Anya was helped to a place of honor at the feast, where the elder Squill formally recognized her as a friend of the people, the highest honor they could bestow on an outsider. The days that followed were focused on recovery, both Anya's personal healing and the broader restoration efforts for areas affected by the blight. The Squills proved to have extensive knowledge of plants with decontaminating properties, and, under La's guidance, they began a systematic treatment of the most damaged regions. 2 months after the facility incident, Anya had fully recovered and had integrated more completely into Squill society than she would have thought possible. She had a permanent dwelling in the village, had mastered much of their language, and had begun teaching them principles of earth engineering that worked with, rather than against, Xylos's ecosystem. It was during this peaceful period that the unexpected happened. Pip rushed into Anya's dwelling one morning, chittering excitedly and pointing skyward. Following the Squill outside, Anya saw what had caused the commotion. A Commonwealth shuttle was descending toward the clearing where she had first been deposited on Xylos. Her 6 months of exile were complete. "They actually came back," she murmured, surprised despite herself. Part of her had wondered if the Commonwealth had intended the exile to be permanent. The Squills gathered around her, sensing that something significant was happening. The elder approached, making a questioning gesture. "My people have returned," Anya explained. "I was only meant to stay here for a set time. That time is now over." Understanding dawned in the elder's eyes, followed by a sadness that was echoed throughout the community. Pip clung to Anya's leg, making distressed sounds. "I need to at least speak with them," Anya said gently, kneeling to meet Pip's gaze. "Will you come with me? Show them what we've accomplished together." The little Squill hesitated, then nodded bravely. When Anya emerged from the forest's edge into the landing clearing, she was a very different figure from the exile who had arrived 6 months earlier. Dressed in clothing crafted from local materials, adorned with Squill symbols of status and accomplishment, and accompanied by a contingent of the forest people, she looked more like a native diplomat than a prisoner. The Commonwealth shuttle had landed, and several figures were emerging. Anya recognized the Flexian officer who had originally transported her, now accompanied by a junior Kthar delegate and what appeared to be his scientific team. "Captain Sharma," the Flexian called, their skin displaying patterns of shock and confusion. "Is that you?" "It's me," Anya confirmed, approaching with dignified confidence. "My exile is complete. I'm ready to return." The scientific team was staring in undisguised amazement at the Squills, who stood proudly alongside Anya. "You survived," the Kthar delegate said, his frill fluttering with conflicting emotions. "And you appear to have made contact with an unknown sentient species." "The Squill are more than just sentient," Anya replied coldly. "They're a sophisticated culture with extensive knowledge of this planet's ecosystem. Knowledge that saved all our lives when we had to neutralize a malfunctioning power core left behind by previous visitors to Xylos." The scientist's attention snapped from the Squills to Anya. "Power core? What power core?" one asked urgently. Anya explained about the abandoned mining facility, the leaking containment systems, and a desperate mission to prevent a catastrophic meltdown. As she spoke, the Commonwealth representative's expressions shifted from skepticism to alarm. "We detected unusual energy readings from this region 2 months ago," the lead scientist admitted. "We assumed it was a natural phenomenon. You're saying it was an artificial power source in meltdown? One that would have contaminated a massive area if we hadn't stopped it," Anya confirmed. "The facility bears markings of the Viridian Consortium, though it appears to be centuries old." The Cathar delegate's frill flattened completely against his neck, a sign of extreme distress or embarrassment. "The Viridians are our ancestors," he admitted reluctantly. "Before joining the Commonwealth, they had a history of exploitative resource extraction and abandonment of hazardous sites, apparently," Anya added pointedly. "The situation rapidly evolved from a simple retrieval of an exile to a major diplomatic and scientific incident. The team requested permission to study the facility remains, which Anya translated for the Squill Elder. Permission was granted, but with conditions. All research must benefit the Squill people, and the Commonwealth must commit to cleaning up the remaining contamination." As these negotiations proceeded, the Flexian officer approached Anya privately. "I should inform you, Captain," they said, their skin showing genuine regret, "that there have been developments regarding your original conviction." Anya raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the Cathar energy matrix you identified as flawed experienced additional failures after your exile. Investigation revealed that the vulnerability was indeed in their original design, exactly as you had reported." The officer's skin flushed a deep purple. "Your conviction has been overturned. There's talk of reparations." Anya absorbed this information with surprising calmness. 6 months ago, she would have been furious, demanding justice. Now, after everything she had experienced on Xylos, the Commonwealth's politics seemed almost trivial. "And what about the Squill?" she asked. "Will the Commonwealth recognize them?" "That process has already begun. Your discovery of an advanced sentient species is being treated as a first contact situation. They will be offered protectorate status until formal relations can be established." Over the next few days, as Commonwealth scientists carefully examined the facility remains and began preliminary decontamination procedures, Anya faced a decision. The shuttle would be departing soon, and she needed to choose whether to return to her old life or remain on Xylos. The Commonwealth had made her an attractive offer: full exoneration, restoration of her rank, and a new position as liaison to the Squill and special advisor on Class Gamma Deathworld environments. Her experience would be invaluable in establishing proper protocols for similar worlds. But Anya also knew that leaving would mean abandoning the community that had embraced her, and particularly Pip, who had become something like family. On the eve of the shuttle's departure, she sat with the Elder Squill and Pip under the stars, discussing her options. "Your people need you," the Elder gestured, wisdom evident in every movement. "And you need them, though you have found a place among us." Pip, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly brightened with an idea. The little Squill made a series of complex gestures that Anya took a moment to interpret. "You want to come with me?" she asked, surprised. Pip nodded enthusiastically, then elaborated, not just to accompany Anya back to the Commonwealth, but to serve as the first official Squill ambassador, learning about the wider galaxy and representing their people's interests. The Elder considered this proposal thoughtfully, then gave a solemn nod of approval. Other Squills could continue the restoration work on Xylos, while Pip would ensure their voice was heard in the stars. The next morning, Anya stood before the shuttle in her newly cleaned and repaired EDF uniform. Pip perched confidently on her shoulder. The Commonwealth delegation had been surprised by her decision to accept their offer, especially with the condition that Pip would accompany her as an official representative. The Cathar delegate, who had been humbled by the revelations about his ancestors' abandonment of dangerous technology, personally endorsed the arrangement. "The Commonwealth has much to learn from species who have mastered survival in hostile environments," he admitted, his frill displaying patterns that Anya recognized as genuine respect. Both human and Squill. As they prepared to board, Anya took a final look at the world that had been intended as her prison, but had instead become a place of growth and discovery. Xylos was harsh, yes, but also beautiful in its complexity and resilience, much like the humans who had evolved on another death world countless light years away. Pip chirped questioningly, bringing Anya back to the present. Just thinking, she explained, about what makes a world a death world. Is it the environment itself, or is it our perception of it? The little squill considered this, then gestured the phrase they had adopted as their unofficial motto, Tuesday, for human. Anya laughed, striding up the shuttle ramp with renewed purpose. Exactly. Just another Tuesday. Let's show the galaxy what Deathworlders can really do. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying them toward a future neither could have imagined 6 months ago, Anya reflected that her exile had been the Commonwealth's greatest miscalculation. They had meant to break her spirit. Instead, they had given her a mission, a purpose, and allies who understood what it meant to thrive in adversity. The Cthar and other Garden World species were about to learn a valuable lesson. Never underestimate those who evolved in the harshest crucibles. For them, the impossible was just another Tuesday.